As always, welcome to Bug Free Productions. The bug is back, and we'll be starting soon in a second. I was just looking through my script real quick and finding where things are at, and everything looks audio-wise like it's working. So we'll go ahead and turn that off and switch over to another scene in a moment. Today's going to be, if you watched the last one, you'll remember that I said I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to deal with the way it is. By the title of this this stream, you can obviously tell that that is not correct. I will not be leaving it alone, and the cameras will in fact stack today. I already have the code, and I'm mostly just going to walk through it and show it, and then we're going to actually go back and fix something else that I've had a little bit of problem with. If you call in the last hmm, one of the previous streams, there we go. In one of the previous streams, there's a problem with the ammunition when it fires, how it's firing very slowly and not working, and I just kind of left that alone. So after we go through the way I handled the camera viewport changes, we'll go and we'll look over the ammunition and see. I think it's because we're in zero gravity, so we'll go back to the test scene and try it with gravity. And if it works infinitely better, we'll just there's a few things I know that we can try out and try and fix that. So I can still keep my zero gravity racer up and running, hopefully. So we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna flip back over into the studio side here and flip our, what can we do? Art one? Yeah. As always, remember to follow on Twitch, and that way you can chat in the chat live. And if you can't make the live demos or live demos aren't your thing and you're watching this on YouTube, or you just need to go back and reference this on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. That would help out a lot. And with that, I think we'll jump right into the programming part. So you can see a lot of code on screen, and that might be a little intimidating, especially when you're like, oh, great, we got this whole script to look through today. As you'll notice, it's only 108 lines long, which is nothing. It's practically nothing. So, but basically, so if we flip back to my Unity, and you'll notice that scale-wise is a little bit different. If this is a problem for people looking at it, I'll try and call out as much as I can. Um, this was my sort of thing. I was having trouble getting uh, working on the little tablet because it didn't have room for anything. Um, if this is an issue, like even it's hard for me to read, which if you have this on full screen, I'm sure it's a little easier. It's probably not any harder for you to read than what it is for me. Or it might be a little harder. I'll probably look up how to get that changed near future. But for today, we're just walking through scripts and I'll call things out, and it'll be pretty simple. We're not going to do a bunch of technical, difficult code anyway today. It's going to be just search through the old stuff, figure out why it's not quite what I want to work, and then show you the new stuff that's the camera viewport. So, two things you'll notice in my. Oh, that's not it. Come on. Unity and OBS's icons use the same kind of colors, or very close colors, and it's not great to see on a smaller monitor. It's somewhat far away. Okay. Especially when they're right next to each other. So this is a different scene, which I did put on here. Reason being, so this is the bike scene that I tested before with the other guys when I did the demo. So the way this works basically is it works exactly the same as the demo I showed the other day. It's just that I put it in my bike scene to test it and show you that it works because I wanted to keep that separate. And maybe after we walk through it, we'll add it to that other one and see if it still runs, both of them. So we'll see how that goes. You'll notice I still have a player input manager on here. I didn't change that. I have a player manager, which is added, which we'll take a look at, and I have a camera viewport manager that I also added, all to the multiplayer manager, that object that I created. um, so the main takeaway is I didn't want to handle all this crap by hand, right? Don't want to go through and manage spawning multiple players. I mean, I'll handle spawning players, but eventually I just didn't want to create the player, do all that crap, you know? Some of that, it was going to be a lot. So what I did settle on is I want to use some player input manager to keep handling all that stuff. Um, so basically keeping my inputs and stuff normal. Let's go to Art 2, I think. There we go. So I wanted to keep all that normal. I didn't want to change too much of it because Art, it did a really good job of that. It did a really good job of doing it quickly as well. And then it allowed me to have callbacks. First thing I did when I saw this was so it was the split divide, right? And I wasn't liking that because in Eraser you should be able to see the horizontal view. Because if you split it this way, then you can see more left and right of you, which is pretty nice for Eraser. So then let's say that we I also so there's this little toggle here, enable split screen in player input manager. We had that checked to let it assign the split screen, but if you uncheck that, it'll quit handling the split screen. And all it was really doing was automatically slicing up the screen and assigning it to viewports anyway. So it was really simple. It was just not quite working the way I wanted it. And I wrote a really simple viewport manager that'll take care of that problem specifically. You will hear me talk to myself a little bit as I walk through some of these because I don't remember exactly everything that went and happened, but you'll get the general gist of what I did here. You'll see a stack boolean. You'll see that in there too, and it's just um, to make the decision: do I want these stacked, like one over the other, or do I want them side by side? Which is all that little boolean is for. And it just changes how the calculations are done for the frames, or like how many sections our display is divided into. And pretty much my script has the same uh, short sight or not short sightedness. It has the same kind of exceptions that the other one did, where it doesn't necessarily replace or fill in the screen, which would be something we could add to it or add in addition to. More likely add in addition to. But camera viewports, that looks pretty good. Anyway, so we're not any worse off than we had the original split screen. We've only improved the screen division. In my case, in terms of how I like it, it's improved for me because I wanted horizontal, not vertical split. I mean, I guess that would, I'm not, yeah, horizontal be slicing horizontally, not slicing vertically. So we'll continue with that. So let's go ahead and I'm going to switch over to Visual Studio and show you. I think we're going to start with the player manager. Player manager is basically what? It's coming in here, player monitor behavior, player count 0, dictionary, a dictionary of players and transforms, camera viewport manager, CVM, and then so the idea behind this is this manages our players, right? So this guy is gonna do something on player join, which if we flip back to Unity, you can see um, under events. So I go player input manager, invoke this notification behavior, make sure this is invoke Unity events, and then I pull in my own object, and you can see the player manager on player join. So we have that we're basically getting a reference to this script and then running the on join. And I could have done this directly in the camera viewport manager, but on other player stuff that I want to manage in the player manager, I might want to stretch that out to other utilities. So I don't want to directly put it in camera viewport. And then also, as I change player manager in to connect to other types of services, I can then just call it on player join and send up, and this only has to reference one other point, and then this guy can reference the multiples points. So if you think of it, if you're uh, what is it? Let's see, plane. Let's just throw some child objects under. Okay. So if you are a database person or taking database or have done database type things, it's basically like an ERD, how many objects to how many objects, is my thinking. So I don't want a bunch of one to one, which would be this to all four of these. Um, in terms of individual connections, I would rather have it lumped where it's like, okay, this is one manager and he manages all these guys, and this other sensor just connects to the manager type of thing. So it's to limit my references in code that are built in. Like I don't want the built-ins to have to, or these fill-in fields rather, these ones that I fill in the inspector to have a bunch of different connections. I only want them to have one and then customize how I do that sort of thing in my own scripts, which I think is a nice way to do it. So then that way you know where everything is if you're the programmer. Everything's customizable, and say a designer needs to come and change something, like you made a different script to handle all of your references, or a scriptable object that handles all of them, you can definitely come in here and they just change that and it's all switched over. Not a bunch of uh, problems. Whereas if you had, even if you had this object prefabbed, which we'll go ahead and do, um, where are my prefabs folder? Yeah, text is a little small for me too. I might look into seeing how I can enlarge text in here. Last time I looked, there wasn't anything, but this is a new version, so there might be something. Uh, it's not gonna be in scripts. It's gonna be in assets. It's gonna be in prefabs, and you can see only one of these actually is in use. But we'll pull our multiplayer manager in there. So even if this is prefab, right? Which means we could drag in a copy and do all that stuff. Well, you might get some problems where you haven't seen changes, and then scene changes don't always necessarily transfer all that well, which is why we make them in prefabs. Well, even if we have all this stuff set up and like say we're the programmer and like working with the design team, so we set up some of these objects, right? It doesn't allow me to, I would have to still come into the prefab and edit all of this and then have maybe multiple prefabs with different settings for different testings and other types of things. Um, where we could just have our one script, have some macros, have some if statements, and then do some other stuff. And we won't have to necessarily worry about how it's set up in the object, specifically inside Unity. We would only really care about is it set up in our, like maybe if we had some extra booleans or something in here, maybe if we have to set it. Um, just makes it quicker, I think, to have one reference in here and then have our custom tools and stuff run from a different script that gets the setup here. Alternatively, we could just add some of the methods to this is actually a delegate. So people that know how to use delegates might actually prefer to do that. For testing purposes, I didn't do that because delegates tend to take a little more time, and you want to make sure you always add and remove, which can be, I guess, when it's a singular instance that gets destroyed at the end of the scene, it's not as big a deal. But when I was working in multiplayer, delegates was a big pain because they didn't do that, and actually, this object will be do not destroy on load, so it'll follow through with itself anyway, but those are other later problems that we haven't quite gotten to yet. So let's just go back to the player manager and look at that a little bit. Yeah, that's looking usable. So on player join, we have player.count or player count. So this is the method that's called when a player joins, which is triggered when a player joins and that um, input manager sends out a notification that a player has joined, and it receives that player input. So the input class, we need a reminder. Player input class would be in my prefab of my player, and we put it on, well, I guess I'll pull up the one that's used in the demo, actually. This one. And we put it on the player bod. No, player bod. Yep, player input. So it'll be this input, which is on this object, which means we're working at this level of object right here, the player bod, which means we have access to any of these plus the game object itself as a reference because it's a, what's the word? Da, 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 da. It's a component of this game object. So it has a game object reference. And if we move from here, so this is all good, right? So then we move on from here. If we go back to the code again, and this will be a little bit of flipping through, but I'm not going to do this fancy overlays or transitions, whatever people would use there. So on player join, we got that player input. We increment our player count, which was similar when I was reading similar to when I read through the other player input manager class where it did split screen. There was this in there, which just goes by player count. So I start with 0, and then once I add one player, I get to 1. Which puts me through pretty quickly. So players.add. So we add player count, and this is our dictionary. So players is our dictionary that we defined with an integer and a transform. The key being integer, so everything's referenced by an integer, and a transform, which is the object it's referencing. I wouldn't use this type of stuff for network multiplayer. Well, I would actually, but yeah, I would still use that for networked multiplayer. There's just some caveats. But since this is staying local anyway, I'm not going to worry about it too badly. So we add player count and then api.gameObject.transform. We change viewport. So player count increments. We add the player count and game object as a key value pair. If you're not familiar with that term, consider looking up a dictionary in programming. But basically, what it will be, what the key value is what you'll refer to it to get the value out of the pair. You can do comparisons the other way, it's just not as easy. And then debug.log API, which means a player input in this case, not an API that you would use in other places, which maybe this is a bad name for it, but it's what I thought of in all of 10 seconds, so that's what it is. Could be changed later. Then we have debug.log, that's a testing statement. I know it works, so I can comment this out. Change viewport, which is a method I also created in here, which, so API true, and that means that I'm adding a player because I wanted to allow that if I'm not adding a player, eventually, I haven't done this yet, but I'll go back and add one that removes the player, which would basically just be reassigning viewports, subtracting from the player count initially, and then removing the viewports. And not removing the viewports, resizing the viewports and realigning them. So basically, this just means we're adding a player if CMV is not null, which just means if that object I looked for, camera viewport manager, is not found, that will remain null because that will return a false null or a pseudo null. I can't remember how that was described to me exactly, but this will be a null value. And then cvm.change viewport, and it passes in a camera that we get from the player. And we get add player, right? Bool add player, which we will be adding the player. So one thing to note here, where this comes from is actually something we covered in the last stream. So this comes from the fact that we're using the player input, and player input has an assigned camera, which is its camera in the object, which is right here. And you can see that by simply, where was it? Up here. If I click there, it highlights it over here. Highlights the reference. So that's all good. So we can get the camera directly without having to go look for it. Because that's what really scared me when I started this, is that all of a sudden I got to that method and I'm like, wait, how do we get the camera? Because it's not on the body object and it's not under the body object. Do I have to go up here? And no, just get it directly from player input because that's assigned there, which is great. So we can continue on our way with that. And if we're continuing on our way, we'll continue to go into change cam viewport. This singleton is pretty simple. I was just looking at making, you know, there's one thing that's a little different about this, and that's find objects of type player manager to list, and then I remove this object from that list because it will be included because it's objects of type, so it's all of them. And then it removes itself. And why does it remove itself? Well, it's because anytime there's one in the scene that exists, I'm cycling back to like, okay, so if we find a new reference of this, destroy itself, right? Because that means that we're resetting the players. So that should work perfectly well, right? Work fine. because then it'll basically destroy itself and it'll be a new copy that's in here. Which is also run on enable. You'll remember that on enable, well, we might actually have to change that to have some sort of starter awake function. For right now it works because we're only in one scene, so it's fine for testing for right now, but eventually we might have to move that into awake or something. Maybe make a note of that. Set up singleton. Possibly. Awake later. Let's collect vars, get component CVM. Oh yeah, and once that's on enable, that should be fine. Because I'm not sure if it does the new enable every time we change scenes or not. I don't remember currently, because that's not something I've really worked with a lot. On enable is somewhat of a new thing I've been working with. Because start and awake were causing issues with me when I was doing some AR work on mobile. Doing some things on awake just didn't really work, and I kind of needed to do things to do certain tasks on spawn. Um, but there's not really an on spawn method. It's kind of so you kind of I was kind of using on enable, um, because it was local. Not if I was doing networked, there is an on spawn, but doing local stuff, there isn't an on spawn. It's more of an on enable, which means it's activated. So when it activates, it does these things. So for testing, that's fine. Collect vars is just getting that a little bit, and that's done on enable, just so we have reference for it later, because we can't actually receive anything until we are enabled, in fact. At least we shouldn't be able to. Public virtual void on player join, player input API. So taking in that player input, we add player count, so players, which is also defined in here. I did this twice. Now, some people might not like that idea. They think it should be pointing to one single dictionary, um, which is totally fine, except for the fact that they are in fact not the same. So API game object.transform. Wait. Oh, this is still in player manager. Whoops, I thought we changed things. Okay, we didn't change things. So this dictionary is the same dictionary I just mentioned. We went through that, and now we can change scripts. So we go to change camera viewport, which is called on player join, passing those information in. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So change camera viewport, and if you're wondering what that command is, it's just simply control and click. In Visual Studio, that brings you to your method where it's defined, which is helpful in this case, not if there was a base class with an empty method in it. Which if you've watched any of the state machine videos, you know to be quite painfully true. So we have change viewport, add cam, add player. So here we're doing a cam. We take in a cam. If a cam is not null, if player is add, player add, else player cams remove, and then we divide position cams. Important note. So what did we do? I just did a list actually, so I didn't do dictionary for this one because I'm not going to do anything, or I don't currently plan to do anything where I need to reference the player's camera number, right? Don't plan on it currently. Which, if we were, might do this a little bit differently. Might possibly have another dictionary, but that would also be redundant. But it would be redundant and it also wouldn't be because player number and camera would be what this dictionary would be defined as. But as it is, this uses a list to keep things simple for easy testing. We have a serialized field bool, which is true by default. If you don't put true in here, it usually defaults to false. I believe that's default for, if not C#, at least Unity. Public virtual void on cam viewport. So if we're adding, we just add them to that, and then we divide positions, or remove them, and then we divide positions again. So divide positions is not dependent on how many are in the list. It's done by what's in the list. It's not dependent on an outside count. So protected virtual void divide cam positions. This is the fun part. So a lot of this is directly based off of what I saw in Player Input Manager. The difference is I just had that stack variable. So if stack, it sets the step of x to something different. So we start with a step x1, which if you think about it this way, everything's a normalized value in this case when you're dealing with viewports. So a 1, we're thinking one object, so one camera on the screen. Cool. If player cams dot count greater than 1, if stack, so if we are stacking, we take the step x defined here and set it equal to mathf.floor of mathf.square root player cams dot count. So the logic behind this is keeping this as a float. So you'll say maybe an integer makes more sense for this. And I would say at first glance you're absolutely right. But when you go to do the math, using in the math functions, a lot of these only want floats. And when I go down to do more math later, they only want the floats, like percentages and stuff. They want floating point numbers. And that's why you'll see everything is defined as a float, even though at times certain things should, like more logically are defined as, would be more logically defined as an integer. They're left as a float because floats up to a certain number that we won't be reaching anyway are accurate as integers. Or at least as accurate as an integer. So we're all good. Step x is equal to mathf.floor, being mathf.square root player cams.count. So if you think of a square and think of 4 divisions, so the root of that would be, so say 3 by 3, say we have 9 players, we do 3 by 3, we have effectively a square root of 3, which would be our x step in this case. Or no, yeah, x step in this case. And then we have else mathf.ceil, which is the higher part. So step x, let's take a second and talk about that. So we start with step x, which is how many steps on the x-axis are across the screen. So that'd be 1. Then step y would be up here this way. So if we're thinking about it that way, math f dot floor square root, that means that if we have a non-square number, right, like 2, we will take the floor for our x step, meaning we will take the 1 out of the 2, or we will be taking the, what is it, the 3. There's not another good example, but essentially that's what it's for, is when we get a square that we don't want too many divisions on the x, then we do that one. So the floor, and then we have the step ceil, which is essentially calculating how many x separations we have if we're not stacking. So for example, with 2, we would have 1, 2 steps. And 1 y step. Where if we're stacking, like right here, we have 2 y steps and 1 x step. And then we have math.ceil. So the y is always going to be the highest value because we need to calculate how many. Basically, this is calculating the remaining steps for the y-axis based on the x. So mathf.ceil, let's bring that a little closer and make it a little more obvious. Player cams dot count, so how many players we have in the player cam list, divided by step x. So basically, if we have 3 by 3, then we fill step x, right? So 3 by 3. So if step x is equal to 3, then dividing that again would bring us to 3, correct? So we get the correct square root or leftover remaining value in some cases without using a remainder. Yeah, without using a remainder, which is nice. Which that's perfectly fine to leave in, but I'll be taking out because I'll be moving on to other things after this, which will need space to debug and log. Convert steps to rates. Okay, so the idea, pretty basic here. If step is greater than 0, rate, this probably isn't quite right. I think this was only done for non-zero. This was done for non-zero values. This part I should have commented because I'm not quite certain what I did here. I was kind of going fast and in a hurry to get this done at some point, and I might have. Anyway, rate if step is greater than 0. Oh, because we could have 0 steps. That's perfectly possible. Which is why that's in there. So it's just to make sure if the step is in fact 0, that this does not apply, or doesn't happen, rather. So that this calculation isn't done if the step is in fact 0. So it's just making sure that it's greater than 0 so that we can do the division. Same here with the x. It's just a 0 check, no special need of anything here. So once we have the rates, right? So we have the rates, because our rate is 1 if our steps are 0, meaning we don't need any steps. Don't need any cameras rendered, rather, because this hasn't effectively run at all. So then we come down to here. And this is all in one method. I would break this up, except I was kind of following Player Input Manager as a template, so I didn't want to stray too far away. And also none of these variables are worth saving out anywhere. And then I'd have to pass all this information into a different method anyway, which just leads to a bunch of method calls. So I could, say like here, I could break this into a method that is rate, but then I'd also have to return two values, which would have to be an array or like a tuple or something. It would have only made it more complicated, unfortunately. Or an out. I could have used reference variables. That's something to keep in mind. Using an out or a reference variable method might have helped us a little bit. Which I could use to pull some of this code out and make it a little less long of a method. It might help me organize my code a little bit. Might do that if yeah. We'll leave that for cleanup after one of these videos. It'll be, yeah, it won't be super interesting to watch, and it won't really accomplish anything. But XY's positions and then width height. So I find its position and then width height. This is mostly here so I remember how viewports work. Because viewports are for cameras, right? And it's a little weird. So cam.rect is actually your rect transform, which is your viewport. Essentially, like what part of the screen it takes up and where on the screen it is. So it's a little weird. Then we have cursed step x. So we have cursed step x starting at 0. Because this is a 1, no, it's normalized. So let's do all values are normalized. So they only go up to 1. So it's only go to 0 to 1. So everything's basically done in decimals. Because it's what the percentage is across the screen that it's moved. So here's 0. There we go. Here's 0. Here's 1. Here's 0. Here's 1. So why is current step y equal to 1 minus rate y? Well, because that very corner is 1. And if you place something up there, it'll be off screen. So that guy's like that for that reason. So we want it 1 rate down. So if your rate is 1, it goes all the way down to the bottom. And if your rate's 2, it goes to like 0.5. And then current step x equals 0. We start at 0, obviously. And then for each camera and player cameras, we do the rect. So new rect, cam.rect equals new rect, creating a new rect because this is a, I looked this up, rect is a, I don't fully remember. I thought at the time I looked at it, it was a struct. And it's cheaper to make a new, it's not cheaper to make a new struct, but you basically have to make a new struct rather than, it's easier to do this than it is to change the values of the rect. Not just because I was using this as, this is what they do in the player input system. And then curse step equals curse step what? Curse step y equals curse step y minus rate y. So we increment or um, and decrement because we need to move down on the y, but we need to move up on the x as we go across the screen. So basically when the y hits 0, we move over 1x, move to top of y, and run again. Easy peasy. And then that just recurs and, or not recurs, loops, and we get the outcome that we wanted, which is now we have a split screen function that is run, that is, what was it, invoked by the player input manager, where we created a player manager or that calls our player manager, and then which tells our viewport manager to adjust the camera division on screen. Which this is very basic. It's not going to do like if you guys seen Lego Star Wars, how they do the screen splits vertically, based on where players are in proportion to the screen once they get so far away. So it won't do stuff like that, but it will get us the choice to split horizontally or vertically. And it makes me happy when I go back and I look at, so if we go back and turn my controller back on, who is very tired, we can look and we can get, if we go play, so when it plays, it does run that notification the first time, which is why we need those 0 checks in there, I think. Or it's when there's only one object. I'm not certain which problem it was fixing. Just know that those 0 checks are in there so we never divide by 0, which breaks an application. So first of all, we can go X and we add 1 player, or A and 1 player, and then we go 2 and 1 player, and now I have it split horizontally across the screen. So there's that. So now when we go, what happened? Well, the start button works better if they're separated. There's been a problem with the, okay, yeah, it was just that they were both together and it was messing with the ground check. So there might be a little bit of fixing to do there, but once we actually set up our spawning for like doing placement and other stuff, it'll work pretty good. So what is it, 650? Um, yeah. This would be the point where, yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and look at the ammunition next. I do really love this lane. That's one of my favorite things that I made in this one for some reason. Ah, but it just makes it feel so much more like a bike. Um, and, and again, I'll cover that later when I um nothing about time. It's about I have other things I want to build on screen that would get your guys' demo closer to done so that you could play around with it a bit more. Which are much more important than that. Plus, I have to figure out how that's going to work with the trick system that I'm doing. So those are things to look forward to after this. Hopefully, I'm gonna try and get it done for December, but we'll see what happens. Might be next December. Looking at master's programs, so this might take a little longer because it'll just be a vacation project. But anyway, let's look at that. So we've looked at that. We've gotten all of this done. We've been through all the steps in this. So now you're ready to totally destroy your viewports. Oh, I did use did I use link somewhere? No, it says using directive is unnecessary. Why did I use link? Um, it had to have been that I wanted to think about passing this list as an array into something. Because the best thing about link is literally it's, at least to me, my favorite thing about link, array extensions. So I can just throw in just like let's throw in here just for demo. Let's go player. So what is it? Camera? So camera cam. Um, so let's go, but let's make it an array. Cam equals, and then we're gonna say like play player cams dot to array, and we'll just get an array value. So if you're working with other people's code and you want to just throw some stuff around back and forth between lists and arrays, like you need that kind of adapter, and you don't, and you feel really lazy and don't want to write one, Link is great for that. There's a bunch of other useful stuff in Link too, but I'm just not going to cover Link today because that's a different course for different reasons. Uh, Namely, I can think of it's really good for database stuff because you can basically write queries in it that run in C sharp, and you don't have, like, you can get all the results field into your application, filter it for the based on user, and then chuck her out without having to use a specific database that does that for you and have all those views different. You can just do it in the C sharp rather than um, on the database as a view, which everything has its pros and cons, but as I tend to do most everything in C sharp, I'd probably end up using Link or something rather than um on the database, just because I tend to do, what is it, either MVC websites or um, just straight C sharp applications. Like I do in Unity, I write basically strictly C sharp and then use a bit of the GUI in Unity to futz around and fix some limiters and whatnot. I don't really use um, That would probably change if there were more databases in the projects I've been working on right now, but uh, that's the way it is right now. Change view cam viewport. Yep. So we covered all that. Let's go ahead and open my ammunition type scripts. Just gonna pop over to Unity and figure out where those are. Should be pretty straightforward. I think it's in ammunition. No, not animation, ammunition. Assets, scripts. There we go. Ammunition. Then we have bullet. So let's open ammunition. Let's go back and open up bullet. Oh, did I not close them? I thought they were closed. Any rate, bullet, collect bars, get component, apply deviation, apply initial force, takes in float 8 pow. I passed ammunition in just in case there's something different that I want to do later. Might have extra things like I might add to bullet or to a different bullet later that I want to overwrite this method. Like if I have incendiary and start adding things like that, so like thermal damage, ice damage, if I want to do elemental stats for stuff. And then it can just flux right in with my spell casting and all that crap too. If I want to pull bullet and ammunition into a like medieval type setting, which for this game ain't gonna happen, but you never know. What I'll reuse this for down the line. This is my best character controller so far, so who knows? It's definitely my best camera controller. So apply deviate. We're not doing deviation. We're just applying initial force, add force, force mode, impulse. Okay. So it's adding that impulse force in a forward direction. What's that power? Here we go. What's this do? There we go. Jump directly to ammunition where this is called, which is in fire ammunition. For bullet, fire bullet, this powder. What's our powder? Powder is 10 unless told otherwise. So let's go to Unity and make sure that 10 is, which I'm pretty sure we did. Scripts, ammunition, which it's not going to be in scripts, it's going to be in our prefabs. It's going to be in bullets. That was stupid. Should be called ammunition, but whatever. Ammunition. And we're going to have yeah, those are placeholders. I put it up to 100 powder, which should rocket that thing across the screen. So what we're going to do is, because we didn't put this in our racing scene, I'm going to go to scenes. I'm going to jump over to testing. This is garbage, I'm pretty sure, but as we continue, um, where did that little thing go? Bullet test. There we go. Is it H? Yeah, it's firing so slow. So if I play it, so let's go to project settings just for the hang of it. Set this for -9. Well, that's not exactly what I wanted, is it? So let's hit that back to 0. So what is the problem? Is it's not debugging any errors. So what's our other options then? Other options would probably include um, checking out bullet, which it seems fine. Is there improperly set prefab bullet Spectre? What's your mass bullet? That's a problem. What's a 0.5 mass? Really crap, turns out. But why is it? It's using gravity, automatic center of mass, automatic tensor. It's got to be impulse being like 0.1. All right, let's play. So that's part of the problem. It's just the mass is kind of wacky. Um, so if the only problem is the mass is kind of weird, um, is it that our impulse isn't high enough? Huh. Because I don't really want to set its velocity. Setting its velocity is kind of processor intensive. Even though we're pooling and we're kind of making up for it, it seems like a heavy push. Maybe just do a 0.05. Don't want to go too small on it or I'll start freaking out that the mass is light. But it looks like everything else is working fine. Move slower. 0.1, so let's go 0.05. Let's just leave it at 0.5. 0.05. Alright, that's good enough. The other thing would be to set up a delay if it doesn't hit anything within 3 seconds, so that it just kind of fizzles. Which would be good because we don't want stray fire going all over the map, even if that's what they want to be doing is throwing it across at somebody else on a different platform. Let's just go ahead and not do that. So, mm, that's fixed. That took us all of 5 minutes. Nice. Um, let's go ahead and keep that going. And since we have the multiplayer working and all that stuff, we'll just do some cleanup. Pull over to ammunition maybe. And we'll just keep working on those guys. One of the things, so this is after, I'll probably pull some more. objects and stuff in and show you guys these things later. Um, particle effects, we could make some. I have assets that I'll pull in. And I think I did one on with some particle effects type things and that sort of thing. So if you're interested, you can always check that out. One of my earlier ones. Oh no, it was in the brick breaker tutorial. Yep. So you can go ahead and just glaze through that a little bit. It was on prettying the brick breaker, but use factory item, fire ammunition, and fire ammunition. Yep. So we'll basically just go back to this because we're in zero gravity, 0.5. That's 100 power. Kind of sucked. Might consider going to ammunition and upping the power to like 1,000. Yeah, I could go to 500 and then come back, but let's just try some stuff. Um, apply initial force. This is probably spelled wrong. Uh, apply initial force. Transform forward force impulse. Yup. So, yep, so that's good for that. And then let's go and apply initial force. Fire bullet, apply initial force. Let's start. Do we want coroutine or what would we want? We can't set a event for to go off every couple seconds. That would be kind of dumb. What would be? Yeah, so let's just do a coroutine. Coroutines. Now, what's different about coroutines and different methods is it's actually of a type protected virtual void. Not void. Well, I think it's a, yeah, it's not type void, it's type I. E numerator. Then it's, what would I call it? So bullet would have a, let's actually not do that. Let's do a region type. A region or a region thing. Let's do a region and region. Basically this is just going to be where we throw our crap for different variables that are, I think I usually did, we have a protected float as delay. DACTIVE. Deactive. Let's equal that to 3. Thinking it will be a really long 3 seconds where we pull up memory, which is bad, but we'll fix it later. And that's going to be protected, and it's going to be something else, which is going to be a wait for seconds. Wait for seconds. Um, wait for seconds. Which is equal new wait for seconds. I don't want to, can't really do that. It says that in autocomplete, but that's not really an option. Because wait for seconds can't be declared, or can't be, a wait for seconds can't be created until the scene has begun, which means it can't be declared inside. It has to be declared inside of a method. It can't be declared out here. At least not in this fashion. But this, however, can be a serialized field, and it should be a serialized field. And I'm going to throw a header in here too. And all this is going to say is that this indeed is delay to hide bullet W/O without col, meaning collision. Go ahead and enter that. Add an extra line here so you can see those guys are paired together. So this is working. And then on enable, basically I just want to, nope. I want to go collect vars. Can't spell for crap, so um uh set wait for seconds. I'm actually gonna call this wait for deactive. I could probably do something better, but equal to new wait for seconds of delay active time. And then we'll finally start okay, so delay active. I usually don't let other things set this. It's usually user set only in a object or prefab rather. So I usually use the naming convention of just taking this this guy and capitalize him so that I understand what's going on. Meaning that delay active, which if you're going to use gets and sets to change that sort of thing, not a great idea to use this kind of idea to do it. Might not even be industry standard, but this is how I keep track of my coroutines. Helps me out. And this is at call. Then this is after delay. And then what about that then, right? So let's maybe leave a line open so you guys can see a little bit better. So at call and after delay. After delay, we what? We hide it. So here's the other part we never did, right? So ammunition can pool. We never set up the actual pooling action. So as we continue, we'll probably start making that pooling action, correct? Sounds good. After delay, I'm gonna check this screen real quick. That's looking good. So as I'm checking this, looking at after the delay, I want to hide this object, right? So basically I want to set active false. Set the bullet not active, meaning it won't render, it won't collide, it won't move, it won't do anything, which works for me. Whoops, what? Just, okay, whatever. There we go. That works for me. I think it's like game object dot set active. That's a method, so it's alternatively you can do, I think it's still included, game object dot active, which it does look that's still usable, but set active is more reliable than setting this. Don't ask me why, I haven't read the code, but supposedly I was told that that is true. By a different ID or version of Visual Studio, I was told that that is how they want you to do it, is with the set active false. If you're doing individual components, you can only use active. You can't use set active, which I don't know why that is. It must be pertaining to game objects specifically and not the components, how they only have active. Of course, active on a game object and active on a component are very different in behavior, it seems to me. Where say like this object, yeah, okay, we'll use this light as an example. So if I do this, so the difference between game object off is game object off, unless there's a reference somewhere, nobody can find that object. It's deactivated, right? It's not in searches anymore. Um, whereas the difference between that and light active, light effectively isn't running on the frames anymore. Yeah, so it's not running on update anymore and casting that light. But however, you can still just come in here to directional light and get that component, even though it's not active. So, little dumb things. Let's continue. So we're at back in the code. So it's at active false. At call, we do at call. So what's on the call? Basically, we don't do anything in this method on call. We just, after the delay, set active to false. No problem. Fire bullet, I would also so if we, let's go ammunition, okay? Let's double check for each bullet and bullets. So our nesting object, if I'm remembering correctly, is the ammo, which has a bullet reference to it. And then if we open this, we have bullets underneath it that are referenced to the ammunition. Okay. The idea of this is that it can check if the bullets are active. So ammunition would then need to, ammo would have the reference to those objects already, which we were talking about earlier. So even if the object is deactivated, let's go to bullet script. We can change other things. So firing ammunition, we go fire bullet. And we're passing in this, which this will have a transform. So we want to not only apply initial force, we want to ALIGN align. Oh, don't want to use align then. What would be so we float an ammunition in. So we bring in an ammunition, that gets us a position of the ammunition, which is put at the firing point of which is the transform passed into that thing. Okay, so we need to move the bullet. If it's going to pool, we need to move it to where it should be every time fire bullet's called. We also need to set active. So maybe something like ready bullet. Ready bullet. And this will be a Control C. Protected virtual void. Protected virtual void. And you might notice that I do kind of go back and forth a little bit. That's because I do forget where certain things are at. And just need to refresh a little bit sometimes. Quite often, actually. So if we're just going to pose it, so ammunition is spawned or positioned. Yup. Positioned. And we could use a factory, put it in ammunition, and have ammunition create bullets and pull bullets and all that stuff. That would be very complicated and not very helpful. At least in the way I've seen it done. You'd either want to do that certain type of bullet, being an ammunition has a certain type of bullet with a certain deviation. You could actually do that pretty well. Not too bad. It's just a little bit different logic path than I took to get to where I fell on mine. But anyway, these guys, let's just grab copy and go back to bullet. So from factory item, so position, ATF let's put ATF in here. Let's do transform ATF. So that's reused. And ammo dot transform. So we're getting the transform from the ammunition. So, that's one reason we pass that in, is because then we can get more information from the ammunition class as we keep changing things. Which, honestly, we could just get a power from the ammunition. Um, no reason we can't. I'm probably going to do that, actually. Bullet, so Bullet gets all that information directly from the ammunition. Since we already passed that in, and how do I get the ammunition? The powder. So accessors, public, and then this will just help anyway, because then we can reference the ammunition um, objects directly with images and whatnot, and it just lets us do this immediately. Just get this immediately later. Be float, WDER helps us be more fluid with our powder, which is not at all of quality you want in it. Return powder. Okay, return powder. Sometimes autocomplete's just way off base. Which, it's not way off base to assume I might want to set there, but it is not in my idea that I want it every time. All good. Bullet and ammo dot powder. So fire bullet's basically just decoding the information in ammo and passing it into the methods that need to run. Apply deviation. We don't have any deviation right now. We'll do that later. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what are we at? 7:20, 7:29, like 7:30-ish. Um, we might not even finish the ammo thing, but we'll probably finish the ammo thing next week. Um, Fly deviation. Yep. So, ready bullet, readies it, transforms it for rotation. That's pretty much all we needed for that. Ready bullet, and then apply initial. Um, then we need the set active. So there's two times that we, oh, ready bullet should also have set active. Um, and you can change its position information before you set it active. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Um, Turn on the game object. Like I said, can't spell. obj, I missed the J. Object. Um, um, game object dot set active true. Perfect. So now when ready bullet's called, it'll set all this, set the game object to true, so that we can continue to apply deviation, apply initial force. We might even put this up here, up above the thing just for certain, just for some certainty. There's also one more thing we need to add in here, and that is that the bullet is going to collide with things and set deactive, and then when all the bullets in the ammunition are inactive, the ammo itself is going to pull back, um, which will be reusable. So if we're thinking about it that way, right? Let's go ahead and do that on collision. Instead of set active false, let's create a new method. Oh, before we do that, so this enumerator that we created that does set active false, let's go ahead and call that on ready bullet. So once that's all done, we're gonna start. Coroutine. And then this is going to be protected, virtual, void, EE, deactivate bullet, deactivate bullet. And we're actually gonna cut that, Control V that, deactivate bullet, and basically that just turns that off. Before it does that, it's gonna do, what was it? Stop all coroutines. Stops all coroutines running on this behavior, which is important in a second. So I don't want any coroutines running while this object is deactive. So it cancels all those basically. Um, Basically just stops them from running, cancels them. And I do this first and then set it equal to false. So coroutine comes in, calls this. This will call, cancels all the coroutines. So effectively it will cancel this while it's running after this is called, which is fine because this should still execute. And we do the game object set active false. Reason I do it this way is then we can pull deactivate bullet into deactivate bullet, and Sorry, they're getting a little bit thirsty. So set active true. So one of the last things we need to do is, and I would do this under on enable, um, on collision enter, protected virtual void on collision enter, collision, this being a collision object, might even be a struct, I'm not certain, but virtual void on collision enter. We're basically going to call and deactivate this object. Um, um, can't remember how exactly I did that, but anyway, um, deactivate bullet, deactivate bullet. And the reason we do it this way is because then we can deactivate the bullet, but it's saved basically, right? Because if we collide, so think of it timing wise. Deactivate bullet always cancels all the coroutines, right? Stop all coroutines. Okay. So delay active, it waits for the return and then calls this. This will run because the call will still happen. This method gets stopped in deactivate bullet. It'll get stopped, which is fine because this will all already be called, and then it'll set active to false. Whereas if we call this from our on collision enter, when we collide, so somewhere between the 3 seconds that it would deactivate anyway, then it'll deactivate, stopping the coroutine that is currently activated when the bullet is fired, and hiding the bullet. um, wait for deactive. Delay deactive. Okay. So all of this should work to disable the bullet. Um, we could go test this. However, but let's go ahead and do that while I try and think of what I wanted to do. Did I save everything? Control Shift S. All right. Let's go here and play. And then eventually we should see these ammos. 1, 2, 3. Well, not the ammos, it's the bullets, right? Play. What's the deal with the bullet? Should be timing out after 3 seconds, right? Bullet, delay active. Okay, so maybe that doesn't do. Okay, so that might not be the exact thing to do here. So bullet, let's say GameObject.setActive, and let's set that to false. False. Okay. Let's see if that fixes my problem. 1, 2, 3. Where's the scene? Something's weird. GameObject set active false. Okay. IEnumerator delay active. Ready bullet. Never called. So I need to call it ready bullet. Start. Start coroutine. The name of the coroutine. Delay deactive. The parameters. No execution colon. No colon here. You can see it grayed out at 3 seconds. One, two, three, off. So all good. So it should do the same thing if we hit that collider in front. Which we can test later. So now, how does the ammunition know when to pool? Ammunition knows when to pool when all the bullets are deactivated, right? So all the bullets fire, great. And when we want to check on update, no, we won't want to check that many times. It's like 200 frames a second. Why should we do an extra step on that? So fixed update? Nah, same problem. Less frames, but bigger. Since our physics are running on fixed update, bigger potential for failure. Or bigger potential for impact on performance because physics is heavy. So we need something for bullets to call. We need bullets to be able to call something to tell it that it's hiding itself. And since it would only be like a loop of 5 to 7 to 8, think one shotgun shell is basically an ammunition at the worst performance possible. 8 pellets in different directions at the same power speed ish. So somewhere from, yeah, it's going to be under 20 loops. So we can either keep track of using a list. We can, in bullets, have an active bullets list, which might be the best performance-wise. Won't be serialized. It will be protected. Protected bullet list. Type list first. Because list is like a generic. Bullet. Bullet list must exist equals new list of bullet. no parameters. Reason being, um, otherwise it might not exist when we go to check its length. So we create it new. And also, unlike arrays, there's no penalty really for declaring a new list, unlike an array, which can be a problem, declaring what size that's going to be ahead of time. So um, is use no, it's poolable. Under poolable, there's a pool option, which we would do all of our stuff in then pool. Um, so basically, we need to let's do pool. No, let's do pool. No, protected virtual void, and this would be pool AMO pool ammo, and we'll give it parameters of a thing. And then basically this guy's going to need to take in a bullet type, just so we know that the correct class is communicating with it. Bullet, we'll call it a bull. At fire ammunition, link would be really good in here to demonstrate. Using is link, no, system.link. System.link in using factory item, fire ammunition. Um, fire ammunition, bullets. We want to add them all to the list. The fastest way to add them all to the list is to use bullets equal to bullet list dot to array, meaning all the bullets that are in the array are put into the list, basically. Pool ammo taken in a bullet. The list. So bullets, bullet list dot remove a bullet if bullet list dot count is, that's almost right. I want less than 0. No. Should be less than 1. Bullet count less than 1. So if there's less than 1 bullet in that list, um, let's poolable. Let's just open that. Pool self, the verbiage I used. Pool self, and what was the verbiage I used when I did that? Pool object this. Pulls the object into it. Um, pool. This is just adding itself back to a pool. The used factory item was an item produced by the factory. Did it thing. Um, generic pool. Pool check. Yeah, okay. Just refreshing a bit. So pool self works fine. All this works fine. Um, pool self just adds itself to the pool. So this is fine. I could overwrite it if I wanted. Which I think I will. Um, so we're gonna go protected override pool self. Override void pool self. We still want to do the base pool self, but we want to do extra stuff. Um, but, one of those things is pool self. We want to set game objects that set active false, and in fire ammunition that you can guess, game object that set active true. Um, so when fire ammunition starts, it'll set active, do all these things. If the object is already active from being instantiated, this basically does nil for us, but in the event that we're reusing the ammunition, fire ammunition comes in the use factory item, so it's use factory item. Um, which actually, as I'm talking myself through it, this should be it should just be in there. Um, because it doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't basically everything's going to use that? It'd be stupid not to, right? Because everything that gets instantiated when it's used as a factory item, because factory items are pooled and poolable with their own pools given to them by the factory, everybody's going to use that. So just throw it in the base class. Um, unlike poolable stuff, which might not always set it inactive when it's poolable. Um, but this code will still run even if the object's not active. It's just the update stuff won't run. So movement, that sort of thing. But C# code will still run as long as it's not update dependent. So this should all work perfectly fine. So now would be the testing time. That's kind of it for the 2-hour thing. So we'll hold off there for now. We'll come back to this. I think this is working much more comfortably for me, anyways. Um, I'll see about maybe adjusting text size in Unity. Last time I checked, though, I couldn't. But I think in general, you get like this allows you to see a lot more of the screen, or not screen, but I can show you a bit more of what my workflow is, and I can fit more things on screen so that you can see it. Um, for example, the it was really hard to keep this, like, that was basically all I had to look at before. So it's going to be nice to have a little bit more here. Might be a little harder to read some of these objects and some of the package manager stuff. But again, I think I'll call them out and see how well I can do with that. Um, yeah, and it's just not going to be, it's still getting there for recording wise. I'll probably get a little bit better when I go to what you call it and stuff like that. But there, when I start TAing again, it'll probably get a little bit better too. As I look at some of that stuff. But for the most part, this seems fine right now. And it might switch to window capture for that, but that should be fine. If you're interested in live demos, we have twitch.tv. You can follow me there and jump in the chat at any point. We have YouTube at Bug Free Productions where all the stuff is stored. Past streams if you want to reference or if you want to go watch one of those, follow along or error check some code, see if there's something that you missed when you were if you were working along with it. Um, with that, I think we're gonna get looking for. I think that's all we're gonna look at for tonight. We'll probably pick up with more of the ammo stuff. Test the ammo right away. Test that next week. Move on to making different ammo types. Being we probably will make different ammo types, but bigger yet, we're gonna really focus on the bullet class for a lot of it because that's what's gonna be our projectile and that's what's gonna cause explosions, um, trails, light, stuff like that. Um, and we'll be looking at that. I'll see if I can get some assets installed in this package and ready. Might check out. Yeah, I think I'd probably open my Marbles account, or not Marbles account. I'd open my Marbles project, which is a marble shooter type game that I was making for online. Um, we might, yeah. I'd walk through the online part of it. We might do that for something coming up later. Uh, art streams are either gonna stay comics or they're gonna be. Might just start working on game art for this one so you guys can see some of the process I go through for that. Working on uh different vectors and logos and stuff like that. Uh, that would also just give me time to ink it over and get that nice and finished. Get it nice and rendered. Because I'll be starting bike skins and stuff too. We'll see if we can get Grady on to do some bike skins. Might do some. We'll see how that works. Yeah. We'll see, we'll see, we'll see. But with that, I think we're gonna wish everybody a good night and yeah. Hope everything's going well and everybody have a bug-free night.